You always think you'll recognize the moment your life changes. You imagine it coming with fireworks or screaming, or some unmistakable dramatic crack in the air that says, "Pay attention. Everything will be different now." But for me, it began with silence. I opened the front door of our Charleston home quietly, wheeling my suitcase across the threshold with the intent to surprise my husband. I'd cut my work trip short, 3 days early, and picked up his favorite Thai food from a little place we used to go to when we were broke and in love. It was supposed to be a small gesture, something to remind him that we were still us. The house felt off, not empty, just too still, like the calm right before a hurricane touches ground. A strange pulse vibrated through the floorboards, low, rhythmic music I'd never heard before. Not the jazz Ethan played while cooking or the indie acoustic playlists we used to make for lazy Sunday mornings. No. This music felt intentional, dark, sexual. A primal instinct kicked in. I didn't call out. I didn't announce myself. Instead, I moved through my own house like a stranger, carefully placing the takeout on the marble counter and walking barefoot down the hall. The bedroom door was cracked open just an inch. Just enough to see. And what I saw burned itself into my memory so completely that even if I live to be 100, I will never forget. She was dancing. Naked. Vanessa. My best friend since college. Maid of honor at my wedding. Godmother to my son. Vanessa was in my bedroom, completely nude, her hips moving to the beat in a way that was meant for seduction. Meant for my husband. Her red hair cascaded down her back like fire, and her eyes were locked on Ethan, who sat on the edge of our bed with a glass of bourbon and a smile I used to think was mine. I didn't scream. I didn't burst in or throw the door open or demand answers. Instead, I reached for my phone with hands that felt detached from my body. I took 3 photographs, slow and steady, making sure their faces were clear. The framing, ironically, was perfect. And then I backed away, closed the door, and walked out. I sat in my car in the driveway for 2 hours, hands glued to the steering wheel, body buzzing with adrenaline and disbelief. I watched as she left my house. She looked disheveled, sure, but proud, radiant even. She had no shame. She waved at our neighbor like she'd just finished watering my plants, not desecrating my marriage. I had known Vanessa for nearly 2 decades. We met at Columbia University. We bonded over late-night ramen and the pressure of final exams. We laughed about exes and dreamed about futures. She had seen me at my most vulnerable, puking from morning sickness, crying over my first miscarriage, panicking before client meetings. I once told her she was the sister I never had. She told me I was the only real family she had left. And now, she was sleeping with my husband. There was no other word for it. She was in my home. In my bedroom. Naked. That night, I cooked dinner, as though nothing had happened. Ethan came home pretending to have had a long day at the office. I kissed him on the cheek, asked about his work, nodded along while he lied through his teeth. The way he could do it, with such ease, such comfort, it turned my stomach. It terrified me. "Claire," he said, looking up from his phone. "You're in a good mood." "I was thinking," I said casually. "Maybe we finally host that dinner party we've been putting off." He raised an eyebrow. "Who were you thinking of inviting?" I smiled. Really smiled. The kind of smile that reaches your soul, because for the first time in hours, I felt something other than pain. "Oh, just a few close friends. I thought maybe Vanessa. And her parents. They're in town for that medical ethics conference, right?" His hand paused midair. Wine glass, half raised. "Her parents?" "Sure. Why not? Vanessa's basically family." He looked away. I didn't. The seed had been planted. That night, while Ethan snored next to me, I lay awake with a new kind of clarity in my chest. It wasn't anger. Yet, it wasn't sadness. It was something far colder, controlled, focused. I was done playing the fool. Done playing house while they laughed at me behind closed doors. Something inside me had shifted forever. In the days that followed, I began collecting pieces, emails, texts, calendar overlaps. I logged every client meeting that matched up with hotel bookings. I checked our joint bank accounts. I combed through cloud storage. I traced Venmo transactions. I found lingerie charges to a boutique in Savannah and spa bookings under her name, paid with our money. I built a case file like I was preparing for trial, and still I said nothing. Ethan brought me flowers one night. Vanessa called to ask about my son's school recital. I played my part. Sweet, stupid, trusting. But inside, I was watching everything, measuring every lie. You see, betrayal doesn't just happen. It builds. It's layered. It grows in the cracks between trust and routine. And when it finally breaks, it doesn't just split your marriage. It fractures everything you believe about yourself. I began to wonder, how long had they planned this? Was I ever enough? Were all those moments we shared, those birthdays, those hospital visits, those vacations, just filler for the show they were performing behind my back? Vanessa once told me I was too kind for my own good. I now understood what she meant. But kindness has limits, and mine had just expired. If you've ever been betrayed, truly betrayed, you know the feeling. The way the air changes, the way reality begins to tilt. You begin to question the floor beneath your feet. Is this real? Did that really happen? Could the people you love most be capable of this? The answer, of course, is yes. And once you realize that, once you accept it, you have a choice. You can crumble, or you can sharpen. I chose the latter. I began making plans, quiet ones, strategic ones. Vanessa's parents had always been proud, conservative, and deeply religious. Her mother was a respected psychologist. Her father, a retired federal judge. I remembered how Vanessa once said, "If they ever knew half the things I've done." Well, now they would, and not just know. They would see. But before I give you the rest of this story, the part where the tables turn, where secrets are exposed in ways no one could have predicted, I need you to do one thing. Subscribe to this channel. Your support is what fuels stories like these, stories about truth, resilience, and justice. If this first part hooked you, if it made your chest tighten or your heart race, then trust me, you need to see how it ends. And now, just to stir your thoughts, which betrayal do you think hurts more? A. Being cheated on by your spouse. B. Being betrayed by your best friend. Drop your answer in the comments, A or B. Let's talk about it, because this is just the beginning. The morning after I watched my best friend dance naked for my husband, I looked in the mirror and saw someone I barely recognized. My face was the same, familiar features, tired eyes, but something inside me had fractured. Not broken, not yet, but undeniably shifted. I went through the motions, packing Leo's lunch, braiding his hair, helping him find his lucky socks for school. I smiled. I kissed him on the forehead, and then I watched him walk up the school steps, small and unaware, with a backpack almost too big for his frame. As soon as I pulled away from the school parking lot, I gripped the steering wheel, so tightly my knuckles whitened. My stomach churned, not from the betrayal, but from the effort it took to keep up the act. Pretending nothing had changed when, in fact, everything had, I drove to a small cafe a few miles from downtown Charleston, one I used to go to when I needed to think. I sat in the corner booth and opened my laptop with trembling hands. I didn't have a plan yet, not really. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to allow myself to live in a house of mirrors. If the foundation of my life was a lie, I was going to dig until I reached bedrock. I started with the easiest place. Our shared cloud account. Ethan had never been tech-savvy, and we'd always used automatic syncing for photos and messages. Within 20 minutes, I was staring at 6 months of messages between him and Vanessa. They didn't even try to hide it. Not really. They'd used clever nicknames at first, but soon dropped the charade entirely. There were photos, some explicit, others far worse in their emotional intimacy. A picture of Vanessa in our kitchen, holding the coffee mug I'd custom-ordered for Ethan last Christmas. Her feet tucked under her, her smile smug. My home had become their playground, and the worst part, the way they talked about me. Not with guilt or hesitation, but with pity, amusement, like I was some clueless extra in the movie of their grand romance. She still has no idea, Ethan had written. She's too trusting, Vanessa responded. It's her sweet little flaw. That line made me close the laptop and sit back, hand over my mouth, eyes burning. My sweet little flaw. I'd loved her like a sister, and she'd reduced me to a punchline. But the devastation only lit a fuse I hadn't known I possessed. By that afternoon, I was deep into our financial records. Ethan had always managed most of our joint investments. I'd trusted him. Of course I had. We made decisions together, or so I thought. But now, with my eyes open, I could see the discrepancies. Transfers made on weekends. Payments to unmarked accounts. It took me hours of cross-checking before I found the pattern. He was siphoning money, slowly, methodically, into what looked like a cryptocurrency wallet and a second account under a name I didn't recognize at first. But then it clicked. The name belonged to a limited liability company registered in Georgia. A shell account. Something created to hide funds, separate from our life. By the time I closed my laptop again, my heart wasn't racing. It was slow and heavy. Ethan hadn't just betrayed our vows. He was planning a future without me. A future with Vanessa. The money wasn't the only thing he was trying to take. He was trying to erase me from the picture entirely. I spent that evening making notes, pages and pages of them, dates, amounts, login screens. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was preparing. I didn't know where this would end yet, but I knew I'd need proof. Cold, indisputable facts. I would not let him gaslight me. Not when it came to Leo. Not when it came to our home. The next morning, I booked a consultation with a family law attorney. I told Ethan I was updating our wills and he didn't question it. He kissed me on the cheek before leaving for work, and I felt nothing but disgust. Her name was Marcia Daly. 40 years in practice, razor-sharp eyes, a calm demeanor that gave nothing away. I told her the truth, every detail I had. I showed her the messages, the photos, the financial trail. She didn't flinch, just listened, took notes, asked precise questions. "The element of surprise is your power right now," she said. "They think they're clever. Let them keep thinking that. In the meantime, gather everything. Financials, legal documents, evidence of the affair. Custody will favor you if we can prove instability or malice." "What about the house?" I asked. "That depends on how you want to play this. Emotionally or strategically?" I looked at her. "Both," she smiled. "Then let's get to work." I left her office lighter than I'd expected. Not hopeful, not yet, but armed, informed. I had options, and options when your world is collapsing feel like power. Back home, I began scanning everything. I started using a burner phone, keeping digital copies stored on an encrypted drive. I rented a storage unit in Mount Pleasant under my maiden name and began quietly moving valuables, documents, heirlooms, anything I wouldn't want lost in a messy divorce, And then came the part I didn't expect. Vanessa called me. It was 2 days later. Her voice was chipper, sugary sweet. "Hey, babe. Ethan mentioned you're planning a dinner party? How exciting. Should I bring wine?" I stood in my kitchen, staring at the call screen, bile rising in my throat. "Yes," I said, calmly. "Bring something nice. It's going to be a special evening." She laughed. "Oh, I love that. You always throw the best parties." "Oh, this one will be unforgettable," I said. "Trust me." I hung up and sat down, trembling. Rage is exhausting. Pretending is harder. But I kept going, because now there was something stronger fueling me. Purpose. The following afternoon, I went to pick Leo up from school and watched as he ran toward me, arms flailing, his whole face lit up. He'd drawn a picture in art class, a house with stick figures, a mommy, a daddy, and a little boy holding hands. Underneath, he'd written in crayon, "My family." I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I praised the drawing, hung it on the fridge, and waited until he was asleep, before I allowed myself to feel anything. I stared at that picture for hours that night. I thought about what kind of world I wanted Leo to grow up in, what kind of example I was setting, not just as a mother, but as a woman, a wife, a friend. I couldn't teach him that love meant silence, that forgiveness meant tolerating betrayal. I had to show him that truth mattered, that dignity wasn't about staying quiet to keep the peace. It was about speaking, even when your voice trembled. So I began planning the dinner. Ethan was receptive, if a bit unsure. "Vanessa's parents?" he asked again when I mentioned them. "Yes, they're in town. You've never really talked to her dad, have you?" He shrugged. "Not much." "Then it's a perfect chance to connect. Family to family." He nodded, though the unease was written all over him. I saw it in the way he checked his phone more often, the way he paused before answering. Something in him was shifting. Maybe he sensed something. Maybe he was just nervous because he couldn't control the script anymore. I didn't care. I was already 2 moves ahead. The next day, I called Vanessa's mother. "Elaine," I said warmly, "I would love to have you and Paul over this weekend. It's just a small dinner, nothing fancy. I know you're busy with the conference, but it would mean so much." To my surprise, she agreed almost instantly. "That's so kind of you, Claire. We've been meaning to catch up. You know, Vanessa always says you're more like a sister than a friend." My stomach twisted, but I held my tone. "She's very dear to me," I said. I hung up and stared at the wall. Soon, the clock would run out. The illusion would end. But until then, I would set the stage. And they, Ethan and Vanessa, would walk right into it, smiling, oblivious, just like I once had. There's a specific kind of silence that exists in the days before everything falls apart. It doesn't feel like peace. It's too tight for that. It's silence wrapped in tension, like a breath held too long, like the moment before a vase hits the floor, when you know the impact is coming but can't look away. The days leading up to the dinner party were filled with exactly that kind of silence. Everything looked normal, but under the surface, everything was sharp. I spent those days orchestrating every detail with meticulous care. Not out of anger, but out of purpose. A quiet, calculated sense of justice had taken root in me. I wasn't interested in revenge for the sake of drama. I wanted clarity, exposure, truth laid bare. And I wanted them, Ethan and Vanessa, to watch it all fall apart with their own eyes, right in front of the people whose approval they'd always craved. I called a catering company from Somerville, one I knew wouldn't recognize our faces or gossip in local circles. I asked them to prepare an elegant but understated menu, something dignified, classic. I chose wines carefully, especially the Cabernet I knew Elaine Hart favored. Vanessa had once posted a picture of it on Instagram with the caption, "Mom's favorite, reserved for special nights." This would certainly qualify. Every part of the evening was staged. I rearranged the dining room so the lighting would be soft but not dim. I placed the table so that the main chandelier cast a gentle spotlight directly on the seat where Vanessa would sit. I knew every line of sight. I knew where Elaine and Paul would be able to look into Vanessa's eyes and see what I had seen. I also installed 3 discrete cameras, one in the dining room, one in the foyer, and one in the living room, hidden within decorative fixtures that blended perfectly into the space. I needed full coverage of every angle. Not just for proof, though that was part of it, but because I wanted to capture their faces, the exact moment when pretense gave way to truth. Each night after Leo went to sleep, I sat in the dining room, alone, studying the angles, rehearsing my words, refining the tone I'd use. Not angry, not tearful, just certain. I'd read somewhere that certainty is more powerful than rage. I wanted them to feel that, the finality of it. Vanessa texted me 3 times that week. Each message was breezy and familiar. So excited about Saturday. Let me know what I can bring. Hope you're not stressing too much. You always go all out, I replied to each one with warm, brief responses. I didn't want to give her reason to worry. Not yet. If she sensed anything off, she might find a reason to cancel. But I knew Vanessa. She wouldn't miss an opportunity to perform. She always needed an audience. And this time, she would have one. Just not the kind she expected. Ethan, on the other hand, began to fidget in subtle ways. I could feel his nerves growing. He asked more questions than usual, about the guest list, the food, the wine selection. On Wednesday, he suggested we invite a few more people, just to make it feel more casual. I smiled at him over my coffee. I thought you didn't like big gatherings. I just think maybe it'd be less pressure, he said, not meeting my eyes. Pressure? I tilted my head. It's just dinner, Ethan. With close friends, family. He didn't respond. On Thursday afternoon, I watched him from the kitchen window as he paced our backyard on the phone. He was trying to stay out of earshot, but I knew that stance. Shoulders hunched, head slightly turned. It was his nervous tell. I didn't need to hear the words to know who he was calling. I didn't need to know what they were planning. Whatever strategies they were whispering to one another wouldn't matter. Not anymore. That night, after Leo went to bed, I opened the old chest in the hallway closet and pulled out a box of Ethan's keepsakes, college memorabilia, old letters, trinkets he'd refused to throw away. I found the photograph from our first year of marriage. Us standing on a cliff in Maine, wind in our hair, him kissing my temple while I laughed. I looked so happy, so unaware. I stared at it for a long time before putting it in an envelope, not to keep, but to give to my attorney. Part of the record. A reminder of where it started, and what he had thrown away. By Friday morning, I was tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix, but I was also steady. I drove out to the storage unit I'd rented in Mount Pleasant and packed a suitcase with everything I might need. Copies of documents, flash drives, emergency cash, Leo's birth certificate, passports, a small notebook of handwritten notes I'd started keeping at the cafe. I wasn't planning to run. I wasn't afraid. But I was prepared. Back at the house, I took my time finishing the last details. I arranged fresh flowers, white lilies, quiet and clean. I polished the silver, something I hadn't done since our anniversary dinner the year before. I placed name cards at each setting, handwritten in gold ink: Ethan, Vanessa, Elaine, Paul, Claire. as if we were all players in a beautifully civilized act. On the back of each card, invisible to the guests, I wrote the same word in pencil: truth. That evening, as the sun began to set, Ethan came home late. He looked pale, a little hollowed out around the eyes. I wondered if he'd been drinking. I didn't ask. Instead, I greeted him with a kiss on the cheek, the same way I used to before I knew who he really was. "Nervous about something?" I asked as he poured himself a drink. "Just long day," he said. "Don't worry," I replied. "I've taken care of everything." He looked at me, searching. I gave him nothing but a smile. At around 10 p.m., after Ethan went to bed, I received a message from Vanessa. "Hey, would you mind if I came a little early tomorrow? I'd love to chat before everyone arrives." I stared at the screen for a moment before replying, "Of course. Come at 6:30. Ethan's picking up your parents from the hotel, so we'll have a few minutes." "Perfect," she responded. I held the phone in my hand a long time, letting her words echo. Perfect. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay in bed next to Ethan, listening to the slow rhythm of his breathing, wondering if he dreamt of her, wondering if he was afraid. I hoped he was. I hoped he felt it crawling under his skin. That quiet dread that comes when a lie gets too big to contain at Tio. Dawn. I got up before anyone else. I went for a run, something I hadn't done in months. The streets were quiet, the air cool and sharp. With each step, I felt my body come alive again. Not from adrenaline, but from purpose. This was the last day I'd ever have to lie for them. The last day I'd pretend. When I got back, Ethan was in the kitchen, jittery, holding a mug he hadn't even sipped from. I walked past him, brushing a hand across his shoulder. "Relax," I whispered. "Tonight is going to be unforgettable." He nodded, but said nothing. I spent the rest of the day preparing like I was hosting the most important event of my life. And in a way, I was. This wasn't just a dinner. It was the final scene of a play they didn't even know they were in. They had written the script with their betrayal. I was just giving them the stage. At 6:25 p.m., I checked the cameras one last time. Everything was working perfectly. Every angle in place. Every truth waiting in silence. At 6:30, the doorbell rang. Vanessa stood there in a fitted green dress that clung to her body like a secret. She smiled, but it was too wide, too eager. "Claire?" she said, her voice sweet and trembling at the same time. "We need to talk." I stepped aside and opened the door wider. "Yes," I said calmly. "We certainly do." Vanessa stood in the doorway, gripping a bottle of champagne with a tight, practiced smile that almost masked the tremble in her jaw. I could see it. Barely there, just under the surface. A faint tremor in her hand, the too bright look in her eyes. She was trying to read me, scanning for any clue that something was amiss. "Claire," she said again, stepping across the threshold. "We need to talk." I gestured to the living room without answering. "Let's sit." She hesitated, then followed, her heels clicking across the hardwood. I sat in the armchair, leaving the couch for her. The same couch where she'd sat 100 times before, laughing beside me, holding my child, sipping wine and talking about nothing and everything. But tonight, it was a stage, and she didn't yet know her part was over. She looked around, adjusting the hem of her dress, clearing her throat. "You've been different this week." I tilted my head. "Have I?" "Not in a bad way. Just distant, cold." There it was, her attempt to reestablish control, to regain footing. She wanted to lead the conversation, steer it toward some fabricated reconciliation, maybe even preemptively confess with a watered-down version of the truth. She still thought this was her story to spin. I didn't answer. Instead, I reached for the small remote resting on the table beside me. She followed my hand with her eyes. "What's that?" I pressed a button. The television blinked to life, and for a second, there was only static. Then a paused frame, a single image from the video I had taken days earlier, filled the screen. Her, standing naked in my bedroom. Her body caught mid-movement, her hair caught mid-spin, her expression locked in a moment of focused seduction. Vanessa froze, her breath hitched. "Claire," I pressed play. The clip was short, edited with care, just enough to show what mattered. Her body, Ethan's smirk, their shared glances, her touch, his laugh. I had cut it just before things turned explicit, just before anything could be called obscene. But there was no mistaking what was happening. When I stopped the video, the silence between us was deafening. She stared at the frozen image on the screen, her mouth slightly open, her face losing color with every second. "Please," she whispered. "This isn't what it looks like." "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't insult me again." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they came from shame or fear. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, like a child caught in a lie too big to bury. "I never meant to hurt you," she said. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way." "No?" I asked. "Then how was it supposed to happen, Vanessa? How does betraying the one person who trusted you most usually go in your mind?" She stood, wringing her hands, pacing the room like a cornered animal. "It was a mistake. A terrible, God, Claire, I don't even know how it started. We were both lonely, confused," Ethan said. I held up a hand. "I don't care what Ethan said. I want your truth. All of it." She stopped moving. Her breath came faster now, chest rising and falling under the green silk of her dress. 8 months, she said finally, voice barely audible. "It's been 8 months. I nodded once. "While you were helping plan Leo's birthday party, while you were hugging me after my promotion, while you were sitting at my Thanksgiving table." She flinched. "What hurts the most," I continued, my voice steady, "isn't the sex. It's the fact that you looked me in the eyes every single day and pretended to love me. I did love you," she choked. "No," I said, calm and final. "You didn't. You loved what I gave you. You loved being part of my life. But you never loved me." The sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the silence. Vanessa's head snapped toward the window. I didn't move. "They're here," she said, her voice rising. "Claire, please, please don't tell them." "Tell them?" I echoed. "Vanessa, they're about to see for themselves." Her eyes widened. "You can't. You don't understand. My parents, my father." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said. "Your father is a former judge. Your mother built her entire reputation on family values, and their daughter is about to be exposed in the one place she thought she'd never be caught." Her lip trembled. "This will destroy them." "No," I said, standing. "This will destroy the illusion. And maybe that's what they need." The front door opened. I didn't wait for them to call out. "In the living room," I said loudly. Ethan entered first, his smile already fading when he saw Vanessa standing frozen by the fireplace. Elaine and Paul followed. Elaine stepped forward to kiss my cheek, but stopped short when she sensed the tension. "Vanessa?" she asked. "You're here early." "Mom," Vanessa said, her voice almost a whimper. "Dad." "What's going on?" Ethan asked, his voice hollow, eyes darting between me and the TV screen. I stepped forward, smoothing my dress. I was just about to explain. I turned to Elaine and Paul, my voice calm but cold. "Thank you both for coming tonight." I invited you because there's something important you should know about your daughter and my husband. Claire, Ethan warned, his voice sharp. Let's talk about this. I ignored him completely. For the past 8 months, I said, looking directly at Elaine. Vanessa and Ethan have been having an affair, in this house, in our bedroom, while pretending to be my family. Elaine's hand flew to her chest. Paul's face turned to stone. There's more, I said. Ethan has also been secretly moving money from our accounts, over $180,000, meant for our son's education, our retirement. He's been creating an exit plan. For them. That's not true, Vanessa gasped, looking at Ethan. Tell them. Tell them that's not true. Ethan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Ethan, I said. Your silence says enough. Paul stepped forward, his voice cold and clipped. Is this true? Ethan looked like he was about to collapse. It's complicated. It's actually not, I said. Betrayal is very simple. You lied, you stole, you destroyed. The teen room fell into stunned silence. Elaine turned to Vanessa, her voice shaking. Is this who you are? Vanessa couldn't answer. I walked to the sideboard and picked up 2 envelopes. I handed one to each of them. What's this? Elaine asked, her hands trembling. Contact information from my attorney, I said. She'll be in touch. I'm filing for divorce, full custody, financial restitution. And I'd like you to consider being character witnesses. Your daughter and Ethan were planning a future built on theft and deceit. I'm choosing one built on truth. Ethan stepped forward. You can't do this. Watch me. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. Now, I said, I'd like you all to leave my house. They left one by one. Elaine, her face blank with shame, squeezed my hand as she passed. Paul gave me a single nod. Vanessa couldn't meet my eyes. Ethan lingered in the doorway. Claire, he said, one last time, please. We need to talk about this. Your belongings will be in storage by Monday, I said. The access code will be sent to your attorney. He didn't argue. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, breathing for what felt like the first time in months. Not gasping, not sobbing, just breathing. The truth had finally spoken. The performance was over, and I was still standing. The house was quiet in the days that followed. Not peaceful, at least not at first, but hollow. The kind of quiet that follows a storm, where you walk through the wreckage not to mourn, but to assess the damage. The echoes of what had been still lingered in the corners. The scent of dinner that was never served. The faint scuff marks from heels on hardwood. A wine stain I hadn't noticed under the table. Proof of a night that changed everything. But the silence wasn't frightening anymore. It was honest. For the first time in a long time, my home wasn't filled with lies. Ethan didn't fight the divorce, maybe because he knew he couldn't win. Or maybe because Paul Hart, Vanessa's father, had lived up to his reputation. My attorney told me that within 24 hours of the dinner, Paul had referred me to a financial forensic specialist, the kind who'd make quick work of Ethan's accounts. He knew what to look for, how to trace the crypto trail Ethan thought was clever. He uncovered more than I'd expected. Investments I hadn't known about, accounts I didn't recognize, deals Ethan had made behind my back. When Ethan realized the scope of what we had on him, he folded. He signed the custody agreement with minimal resistance. He relocated to Chicago 3 weeks after the paperwork was finalized, claiming it was for a fresh start. He now sees Leo during scheduled holidays and school breaks. There's no warmth between us. But there's structure. Boundaries. It's more than I thought I'd ever want from him, and far less than I used to believe I couldn't live without. Vanessa disappeared almost overnight. Word spread quickly in our circle, but not from me. I didn't have to say anything. People sensed the shift, and whispers became certainty. She moved back to Boston, back into her parents' guest house, according to a mutual acquaintance who reached out weeks later, cautiously, wondering if what they'd heard was true. I never answered. I didn't owe anyone that. Elaine Hart called me 2 months later. Her voice was strained, but sincere. "I just wanted to tell you," she said, "how ashamed we are. You showed more dignity that night than most would have. And I want you to know we're trying to be better parents, even now." I thanked her, and she cried softly on the other end of the line. That surprised me, the tenderness of it. I expected awkwardness. What I got was grace. Oddly, that phone call felt like closure more than anything Ethan or Vanessa had ever said. My days began to reshape themselves. The chaos gave way to something slower, something real. I sold the house by the end of the summer, not out of spite, but because I didn't need the ghosts anymore. I bought a smaller home in Asheville, tucked into a quiet street near Leo's new school. It had a porch and a garden and a kitchen that caught the morning light just right. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't big. It was mine. Leo adjusted better than I could have hoped. Kids are so much more resilient than we give them credit for. There were questions at first, of course. Why Daddy didn't live with us anymore. Why Miss Vanessa wasn't coming to visit. But I answered honestly, without bitterness. "Sometimes," I told him, "grown-ups make choices that hurt people they love. That doesn't mean you're not loved. It just means they made a mistake." He nodded once, processing, and then said, "Like when I broke the snow globe and hid it behind my bed?" I smiled. "Exactly, except a bit bigger." He seemed satisfied with that. In the months that followed, I began to put myself back together in pieces. Some days were harder than others. I'd walk through the grocery store and see a bottle of the wine Ethan used to bring home, and it would stop me cold. I'd hear a song Vanessa once played in the car and feel the sting of betrayal all over again. But the pain dulled over time. Not because it stopped mattering, but because I had stopped letting it define me. I started therapy again. For myself, not just for the divorce. To unlearn patterns. To understand why I'd ignored the signs. Why I'd clung to something so broken for so long. My therapist, an older woman with sharp eyes and kind hands, helped me peel back the layers without shame. "You loved deeply," she said once. "That's not your weakness. That's your strength. You just gave it to the wrong people." I began journaling again, too. Not the kind of neat, curated reflections I'd once written in college, but raw, unfiltered pages filled with grief and gratitude and anger and hope. Writing became my mirror, and through it, I began to see myself not as the abandoned wife or the betrayed friend, but as a woman who had walked through fire and come out still breathing. One evening, 6 months after the dinner party, I sat on my new porch with a glass of wine. Leo was asleep inside, his nightlight casting soft shadows on the wall. My mother was visiting that weekend, and she joined me outside, wrapped in a cardigan. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, easing into the chair beside me. "I was just thinking about how different life looks now," I said. "A year ago, I thought everything was over. But now, it feels like I'm finally living on my own terms." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, Claire. Not just for surviving it, but for not letting it change who you are." I nodded, blinking back tears. She was right. There had been moments, dark, desperate moments, when I'd wanted to become someone else entirely. Harder, colder. Someone who didn't cry when betrayal came knocking, who burned everything down and walked away without looking back. But I hadn't become that. I hadn't let the pain harden me. I'd let it rebuild me. Later that night, when the house was quiet, I went through an old box of photographs. Not of Ethan, not of Vanessa, but of myself. College pictures, photos from my early career, images of the woman I used to be before I became someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's best friend. I barely recognized her, and yet I saw her in me again. Slowly, quietly, she had returned. There was one photo that stopped me, a candid shot taken in Central Park during a fall trip to New York. I was laughing, head tilted back, arms outstretched, leaves falling around me like confetti. There was something wild in my eyes, something alive. I pinned that photo to my corkboard, a reminder of the version of me I was never going to lose again. 2 weeks later, I launched a blog, an anonymous space where I wrote about betrayal and healing, about truth and dignity and quiet power. I didn't attach my name. I didn't seek validation. But the messages began to come in anyway, from women in Florida, in Utah, in Michigan. Women who had been left, lied to, hurt. Women who were surviving. Women who were angry. Women who were learning to breathe again. We weren't alone. I was no longer alone. On the 1-year anniversary of that night, the night everything changed, I sat on the back patio, watching the sky turn pink and gold. Leo was drawing in chalk, on the stones, humming to himself. The breeze carried the scent of lavender from the garden. I wasn't the same woman I had been. I had scars now, yes. But I also had strength I hadn't known I was capable of. I had reclaimed something precious. Not just my time, not just my home, but my voice. And as I sat there, glass in hand, peace in my chest, I realized something, simple and profound. The truth had hurt. But the truth had saved me, and I would never trade that. Not for any illusion in the world. Claire's story began in silence. A silence so subtle, so ordinary, that it nearly hid the fracture beneath it. A woman returning home early from a trip. A familiar house. A heartbeat in the walls. But what? She discovered behind that bedroom door shattered the quiet, and her world, forever. Her best friend. Her husband. Their betrayal. What followed wasn't the chaos you might expect from such a wound. There were no screaming matches, no broken dishes, no immediate confrontations. Instead, there was strategy. Patience. A deep breath held for days. Claire watched, she learned, she gathered evidence. And then, she staged the moment that would rip the veil off every lie told in her home. But the dinner party, iconic as it was, wasn't the real climax. The real victory came later. It came in courtrooms, in custody agreements, in financial justice served cold. It came in the quiet decision to sell a home that once held laughter, but now echoed with deceit. It came in the evenings spent alone, staring at old photographs of a younger, freer woman, and then realizing that woman was not gone, just buried. It came in her son Leo's drawings, his questions, his resilience. In every time she answered with honesty and grace, teaching him that strength isn't about revenge, but truth. Vanessa left. Ethan relocated. Their absence didn't leave a hole. It cleared space. Space for healing, for rediscovery, for peace. Claire rebuilt. Not by pretending it never happened, but by choosing to carry her pain as part of her story, not the whole thing. She started to write, anonymously at first. What she thought would be a private journal became a blog. What began as catharsis became connection. She heard from women across the country who were carrying similar griefs, different names, different cities, but the same hollow ache. Her story became theirs. Their healing became part of hers. And isn't that what survival really is? Not just enduring pain, but turning it into purpose. By the end, Claire hadn't just divorced a man or cut ties with a friend. She had divorced the version of herself that tolerated betrayal in the name of love. She'd buried the woman who made herself small so others could feel big. And she rose, quietly but fully, as someone unashamed of her scars. She didn't come out colder. She came out clearer. So what is the lesson in all of this? It's not just about infidelity. It's not about catching someone in the act or delivering the perfect revenge. Those are the fireworks. But beneath them is something deeper. The real lesson is that you can lose everything you thought made your life whole, and still be whole. You can be betrayed by the people you trusted most, and still hold on to your own integrity. You can walk away from what breaks you, and walk toward who you were always meant to be. And most importantly, you don't have to become hard to become strong. Claire chose the long road, the quiet strength. She used the truth as her weapon. Not bitterness, not violence, not scandal. And because of that, she not only protected herself, but she protected her son, her dignity, and her future. We live in a world that sometimes glorifies chaos. Social media loves the instant reaction, the loud confrontation, the drama. But there's power in stillness, in resolve, in clarity. That's what Claire's story gives us. And now, it's your turn to reflect. Here's a question for you. Which kind of strength do you believe is more powerful? A, the strength to stay and forgive. B, the strength to walk away and rebuild. Comment your answer below with A or B, and tell us why. And more importantly, what would you have done in Claire's place? What would have broken you? What would have saved you? We want to hear your thoughts, your stories, your perspectives. Comment below so others can learn from your insight, your experiences, your truth. If Claire's journey moved you, if it gave you chills, if it made you angry, made you cry, made you feel something, please subscribe to the channel. Your support is the heartbeat that keeps us creating more stories like this. Stories that matter. Stories that reflect the real battles behind closed doors. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning of 1,000 conversations waiting to be had. So stay with us. Let's keep telling the truth. Together.